المجلس العالمي للمؤسسات المبتكرة مجلس فريد من نوعه يمثل مؤسسات عالمية من مختلف قارات العالم. هذه المؤسسات مختصة بالابتكار وبدعم الابتكار وبتعزيز ثقافة الابتكار في المؤسسات وفي الجهات الموجودة في مختلف هذه الدول. المجلس بيكون له دور كبير في دعم تبادل ونقل المعرفة ونقل الابتكارات الموجودة في مختلف قارات العالم ومختلف المؤسسات الموجودة على مستوى العالم، ودعمها وتأثيرها ونقلها للمؤسسات الموجودة سواء في دبي وفي دولة الإمارات أو على مستوى الدول المشاركة في هذا المجلس. برنامج دبي للتميز الحكومي يعتبر أحد الأعضاء المؤسسين لهذا المجلس، والبرنامج كان له دور وباع كبير في دعم الابتكار والمبتكرين على مدى 20 سنة الماضية، من خلال المبادرات اللي يقدمها، من خلال الفئات الموجودة في جائزة برنامج دبي للتميز الحكومي. البرنامج له دور كبير في هذه المبادرة، وسيدعم الابتكار والمبتكرين وثقافة الابتكار على المستوى المحلي وعلى المستوى العالمي، وسيساهم في نشر كل الإنجازات وكل الابتكارات الموجودة على مستوى دبي للعالم بأسره.
So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Global Council for Innovative Organizations monthly meeting. Our objective is to bring together thought leaders, experts around the world, and share frameworks of what is innovation and how innovation can be done anywhere, everywhere. The GCIO was created for the main objective of finding people with unique frameworks, unique ways of thinking, and to make sure that those thinkings are made available to everybody, everywhere. We are looking for frameworks in government. We're looking for frameworks in universities, frameworks in technology parks, frameworks in corporations, frameworks across the globe that will power innovation in new and different ways. Today, we've got a fantastic speaker. His name is Rafael Popper. He is a world expert in terms of foresight. Dr. Popper has worked in virtually every industry in the world in imagining the future, putting those imaginations together to put together the plan for how to make it real. He has worked in deep space. He has worked in mining. He has worked in governments. He's worked with funds, and he's worked everywhere. Today, we're going to get a great experience from Dr. Popper about this particular important topic of futures and getting it right and getting started. Dr. Popper's background, as you can see, is very rich, very broad, and has worked for some of the most prestigious institutions in the world, from the United Nations to European Innovation Council and many other commissions. He has worked as an expert himself in terms of entrepreneur and other work that is done, but professor, PhD, you name it, he's done it all. So with that, maybe we can start presenting the introduction of Dr. Popper. Welcome to this particular event. Just to get everybody started, how do you get started in terms of thinking about futures? How young were you when you were imagining things and saying how and what's next and what else? When did it all start?
Yes, thank you, Hitendra. I believe I can answer that by kicking off the discussions with the presentation. If I can share the screen.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So let me share the screen. Can you see?
Of course.
Yes.
Good.
There
Excellent.
you go. You have the screen and you are on your own. So please, you got about 30 minutes.
Thank you,
and then there'll be another video and there'll be Q&A after that.
Yes. So thank you for the invitation. And how did I start? I started quite some time ago, working first for the United Nations, as together with some colleagues and some researchers, we developed back in the late 90s the very first software to do online foresight, and United Nations Industrial Development Organization discovered us, and I accepted a job in Italy. So I have worked in international organizations quite early in the 2000s. Then working together with Manchester University, I switched to academia, where I'm still linked as a director of several executive education courses in foresight and sustainable futures. And yes, you were right. In 2011, I launched the spin-off Futures Diamond, which is still ongoing. and basically aim to develop frameworks and to develop platforms, customized, tailor-made platforms. And in 2016, I switched to the public sector, research and technology organization in Finland. I'm still living in Finland. And I had a short period as full professor in Higher School of Economics in Russia. And later on, I joined Turku University as a professor. And more recently, I also accepted an invitation to create a Foresight Center in a public organization. And after a couple of years working there, I decided to create a similar Center for Foresight in a private non-for-profit foundation, Technology Partners Foundation in Poland. My family have a huge family in Poland, my wife and large friends, community of friends. So I continue in Poland creating different type of enterprises. So this presentation, and this is answering your question on where I'm coming from and where I started international organizations, but I have continued working in academia continuously, and then in international organizations and in the private sector. For today, I have structured the presentation around 5 main blocks. First, introducing what is Foresight and horizon scanning. Then, why it is important to focus on emerging technologies and disruptive innovations. A selection of best practices that together with the European Innovation Council and the European Commission, we have selected in order for me to share some insights on European Innovation Council founding of innovation approaches and some conclusions and way forward. Very basically, Foresight and horizon scanning, they require 3 fundamental principles. The principles of looking into the future, perspective, and it's not about predicting, it's about co-creating and anticipating both desirable and undesirable futures to build resilience towards those not very desirable ones. It's participatory, and this principle is important because it helps to bring multiple stakeholders, the triple or the quadruple helix, depending on the aim of the project, bringing business, bringing government and research organizations, and very often, more recently, civil society, that's the quadruple helix, and policy-making principles, so it's a practical orientation. So if these 3 principles are met, then you might be confronted with a Foresight initiative. If you want to make it fully fledged Foresight and more advanced, then the principle of evidence-based gathering data and blending data with creativity is important. Coordination principle of multiple agendas. So the policy-making principle is important, but the coordination requires an understanding of the need for policy mix. It's about innovation policy, but it's also about research policy. It's also about education policy, and it's also about the policy related to the implementation domain. If it's about hydrogen or energy transition, so energy policy. So if it's about e-mobility, then transport policy and so on, or health policy. So the coordination principle is important, and not only to coordinate the policy mix, but also the investments that are required from the private sector and the efforts that are needed from the research and education actor. And it's transdisciplinary. So this transdiscipline is important because regardless of the specific sector that we're looking at, there are implications which are involving expertise and know-how from multiple disciplines, from social sciences, from natural science, from engineering and technology. So I have been positioning since 2011 and slightly earlier, but in 2011, the concept of looking systematically into the future with this participatory, prospective, and policy-oriented process that is aimed at anticipating, recommending, and transforming a wide range of futures: technological, economic, environmental, political, societal, and ethical. Very important nowadays, and we can perhaps have, if we have time for discussions, talk a little bit more about responsible research and innovation. But this SMART process, SMART is an acronym for, it requires a systematic phase of scoping, with understanding the aims, the rationales, the context, the domain, the time horizon, the methodology, which goes hand in hand with understanding and mobilizing the players. Mobilization is the M for SMART, Foresight, to do what? To anticipate. If we stay at this stage, if we want to be picky or focus on semantic about the difference between Foresight and horizon scanning, I believe that until this stage, you are doing horizon scanning. When you start entering into the phase of recommending different type of actions to transform those technological, economic, and environmental futures, then that's the heart of Foresight. So this Smart Futures Jigsaw I have been using in many lectures in university, or also in consultancies, executive education programs, to frame whole courses for 1 week or a full day, and sometimes a full master's semesters only around this. For each of these pieces, there are lectures and there are specific takeaways, but for today, I only wanted to share with you the framework. As you mentioned, frameworks are important. There is another framework I positioned back in 2000, early 2000, the Foresight Diamond framework, which clusters Foresight methods around 4 different types of knowledges these methods are based upon. So there are methods that are creativity-based, that help to mix different type of original and imaginative thinking. And genius forecasting is one of those. I will be talking about this later. There are methods which are expertise-based. Genius forecasting mixes both expertise and creativity, so they rely on the skills, the knowledge of individuals. There are interaction-based methods that bring collaborative knowledge and idea generation, bringing bottom-up approaches and participation, and then evidence-based methods, data-driven techniques, modeling, literature review, and different type of scanning as well, of documentary analysis, and so on. So in today's presentation, I will be focusing on those that are highlighted there, because they are mentioned in the Technology Foresight for Public Funding of Innovation report, which I will be referring to later on. So these sections just introduce Foresight and horizon scanning. And why are these approaches important for emerging technologies? Well, emerging technologies and disruptive innovations are very relative concepts that depend on both time and geographical context. So I am at the moment in Finland, and today's decisions and today's technologies in Finland might be the future technologies in 5, 10, and sometimes even 15, 20 years in developing countries. So the concept is relative to geography and the time where we are. And the concept of disruptive innovations can be, according to scholars, divided into a couple of different types of understanding. So the low-level disruption, offering more affordable solutions, more economical with acceptable performance, or the new market disruption, creating entirely new markets and our segments. So in this report, which is freely available in the European Commission publications webpage, but you can also find it in the presentation if you later on distribute them in PDF. In this report commissioned by the European Commission in collaboration with the European Innovation Council, was an effort to understand what type of best practices, approaches, and methods can be used by state-funded institutions like DARPA, or private and public funding type of programs like Israel does, or state-funded, fully state-funded initiatives like in Japan, to try to anticipate and try to work out ways of promoting innovation in these areas, especially disruptive ones. And as you can see in the slide, the European Innovation Council is investing seriously 10 billion euros program to identify and develop that. So that's the background. This is the context. And there are 6 specific methods that are highlighted in the report. I will go a little bit deeper in the first one on horizon scanning, which is a structured way of anticipating critical issues in science, technology, innovation. And there are 5 other chapters. One of them focuses on scenarios to produce different type of possible and plausible and desirable and undesirable futures, sometimes also using computer modeling. Genius forecasting, which is combines creativity and benefits from the expertise of creative individuals. Delphi surveys, which rely on expert judgment through multiple rounds. Modeling, especially large language models like ChatGPT and GPT-4 that help to identify knowledge and research gaps. supporting bottlenecks and simulating plausible future scenarios. So this is one of the applications. And last but not least, road mapping, the classic technology road mapping or action road mapping approaches. So horizon scanning. Horizon scanning helps to support different type of processes to identify emerging technologies and disruptive innovations. So that's one of the main uses that in this report we have been highlighting. And there is a growing interest in horizon scanning. So the key role in anticipating those technologies is growing, particularly in policy and funding decisions. It helps to explore potential futures, emphasizing transformative changes and socio-technical transitions towards sustainable futures. And horizon scanning requires tailored methodology. And this methodology, it's important bringing together the portfolio of methods that I highlighted earlier: creativity-based, evidence-based, interaction-based, and expertise-based, systematic mapping, analysis, and positioning of those critical issues. I will be going deeper into horizon scanning later on. And then often relies on commission expertise. So there are specific groups of people and organizations, academics and consultants like you, like us, in different shapes and affiliations. I have also as an innovation bridger or scholar or lecturer. So there are different ways in which I have been approached through university and other organizations to provide this type of insights. Scenarios are powerful and they become reference points when you are developing specific strategic programs, both for innovation management and innovation funding in public organizations like European Innovation Council, but also in enterprises. So scenarios are structured and they support to maintain and to manage innovation portfolios. So it is growingly embedded into those programs to support managing and of this dynamism in the opportunity landscape, because the opportunities are not static. They are moving based on the decisions of multiple stakeholders in the ecosystem. So scenarios help to support managers to engage and rethink the goals, restructure the strategic conversations, and to provide a timely advice and advantage in understanding how to evaluate these options today, because we have scenarios with short-term, longer-term perspectives. So they help to facilitate rational decision-making. That's why this method was selected. Genius forecastings are based on expert insights, drawing on the knowledge and creativity, the charisma of and the authority of different scholars or consultants, technology experts that help to bring in this organizational leadership, the so-called mavericks that deviate from norms, that break the rules to contribute positively with unique rules. Those who are allowed to take the risks. There are organizations like DARPA in the US that encourage. So many innovations, disruptive innovations, are coming from this type of organizations precisely because they're risk-taking. And they have high tolerance for failure. Maintaining that is challenging in organizations to embrace failure, to encourage freedom of enterprise and innovation. They are effective in interaction, bringing that individual expertise with collective frameworks, because you need to understand that when you bring a genius forecaster into a team that has a working framework, it requires to be embedded in a careful way and understanding and using this trained judgment for freedom, for future vision generation to drive innovation and problem solving. And last is this risk of bias and special interest, because we must be careful as well and recognize that this type of methods, they are susceptible to the biases because the genius forecaster might promote special interests, their own technologies, their own solutions, etc. So, and then Delphi surveys have been used in many ways to identify a specific technological breakthrough, to time them, when are they going to happen, what type of game-changing innovations can we expect, the maturity level of technologies, their commercial viability, the impact on multiple criteria, potential stakeholders that might be leading or moderately working on some areas or lagging behind seriously, how to tackle current and potential societal problems like climate change, like health crisis, like the COVID crisis that we have experienced, the feasibility risks and the potential negative impacts of emerging technologies and disruptive innovation, as well as mitigation strategies. So risk assessment and feasibility evaluation. Consensus building is one of the original purposes of organizing these multiple rounds consultations to engage stakeholders, to keep them involved, combining the Delphi with interviews, with workshops, with teleconferences have been used more recently, but building consensus and highlighting the disagreements is another area, and enhancing expert judgment, structuring their insights into judgment, but more importantly, this type of service, they managed to capture, to codify the insights of experts who are not yet publishing in public sources, in academia, or in gray literature, the knowledge they have, the know-how. Modeling, large language modelings are the hot type of method and approach that we can see and talked about today. The ability to create content and solve complex problems across diverse sectors have been one of the reasons why generative AI has surged recently. Research and innovation application potential, so advancing research and innovation by identifying gaps or aiding analysis, enhancing foresight and science and technology, and then public sector enhancements, efficiency of improvements. There are cases in Japan, in Yokosuka, also in Boston, where you're based, simplifying the legal language with large language models has illustrated the potential to increase information and ability. Last but not least, regulation and customization. So open source and sector-specific models have been introduced, as well as new regulatory measures like the European Union's AI Act. They reflect the importance of moving the discourse towards privacy, bias mitigation, and tailored application. The last method is road mapping. And road mapping can be used the classic way, technology road mapping, and to support research and innovation funding priorities, because Foresight supports by identifying those key challenges and research themes, as well as outlining the priority technologies and challenges to guide R&D efforts and decision-making. Also to collaborate, to promote this collaborative approach to define research agendas under those key challenges, update constantly through monitoring the roadmap, our goals, the targets, and shaping strategic directions. Last but not least, governance and management of innovation. So through standardized templates, we have been recently working more with the action road mapping templates that you can see below, around 4 dimensions, and I will be commenting one of the best practices, introduce how this was born. So very briefly into this best practices, there are 4 best practices that together with the European Commission and the European Innovation Council, we have selected, and I was asked to write a chapter, make a contribution in this report on technology foresight for public funding of innovation. The INO project, the technology foresight project, the AI for cybersecurity project, and the combined CASI and Bolero frameworks in those projects. The INO project is one of my favorites, around €1 million some years ago, and it was aimed to help interconnect a wide range of knowledge on issues and developments that might be potentially shaping our future, the future of science, technology, innovation in Europe and the world. So by applying wildcards, low probability, high impact, and weak signals, those seeds of change analysis to the formulation of research and innovation policy. This project position different type of methods and approaches to address multi-perception complexity. This is the world where we are, just from the perspective of an Australian. And when you look at the world where South is on top and North is on the bottom, you might require a few seconds, maybe even 1 or 2 minutes to find out where you are, depending on the size of the country where you're living, where you happen to be based. So foresight, and especially on wildcards and weak signals, require you to change those mental frameworks. The worldviews matter. And we do this systematically in workshops by bringing multiple weak signals, and we introduced the issues analysis framework in that project that led to the identification of multiple wildcards from the analysis of weak signals telling us that some issues will continue in the future. We organize workshops focused on understanding from those signals what are the issues that will end. How can we identify the end of some particular technologies or products, or product dominance, so the end of Nokia dominance and the uprise of iPhone and Apple. And now with electric cars, which car manufacturing companies will end in the near future because of the emergence of Tesla and BID. And then what issues and weak signals are telling us that some dramatic wildcards might reemerge, positive or negative ones. In the red report here, the very first policy alert back in 2011 we wrote about was the killer virus, Corona. Yes, and many other wildcards, interestingly, were identified over a decade before Corona happened. And that was by introducing and forcing experts to think, looking back into the past and thinking hard on what can reemerge from those. And the hardest level of interpretation is how to think about completely new issues, emerging issues that are not linked to the present and to the past. So this was the last framework we shared with the Commission. Then the second case was the Technology Horizon project, which was focused on the health sector and was commissioned by the Department of Health in the UK. We developed platforms to look into the future of healthcare, social care, and public health. And in this project, we developed a double funnel methodology where we look at over 300 emerging technologies, combining different methods. We use trend analysis to further filter them, and together with experts in the University of Manchester and experts back in London as well, in the Department of Health, and looking at what are the technologies emerging in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, US, Denmark, Sweden, Spain. We identified the top 10 key technologies around therapeutic, diagnostic, enabling, preventive, and organizational groups. To do what? To identify what are the strategic implications for workforce planning. And you can see there are multiple methods that we combine to arrive to our reports, which you can download. And if you're interested into health technologies, these are the top 10 health technologies: regenerative medicine, minimally invasive. They're still very much relevant today: genomics, gaming and education, integrated big data. So these are the technologies that were highlighted there, especially the implications for workforce planning. The third case is more recent, it's smaller as well, and it's a rolling type of contract research that I have been doing for ENISA, the European Union Agency for Cybersecurity, combining multiple methods that you can see there on the left, aligned with the Foresight Diamond, and going beyond the SMART process. So after transforming futures, we are evaluating, sustaining, and providing training to the research and innovation team inside ENISA, trying to understand what are the main positive trends shaping the future of cybersecurity through artificial intelligence for the better. But we need to recognize that new technologies, emerging technologies, can also be used for negative and harmful purposes. So the expanding attack surface enables, multiple non-PC-based hacking using AI. AI exploits also vulnerabilities and so on. So we wrote a report looking into the importance of both the positive and the negative trends into cybersecurity and so on. It looks like the connection froze. Can you still hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Then the last case is the Bolero and the CASI project. This was a project that was funded by the European Commission, and we have continued this project with the Milano region, especially the University of Milano Bicocca. And in this project, we were focusing on understanding in a bottom-up way, very inductive way, what is sustainable innovation and to develop a framework for sustainable innovation assessment and management. We look at more than 500 innovations from across all the European Union. That was before Brexit. So we had 28 countries and we had nearly 200 product innovations. over 100 service innovations, social innovations, organizational, governance, system and marketing innovations. And from this, we selected 200 that we wanted to further analyze and assess in a second step of assessment to do what? To identify what are the critical issues. So horizon scanning here again. What are the main barriers, drivers, opportunities, and threats that are shaping the technological futures, economic futures of those innovations? We did meta-analysis of all of this, and we arrived to 60 managerial lessons. I have another lecture or another talk on what are the tweet-like lessons for managers or innovators from all this. But most importantly, we use all these critical issues to identify critical factors, key aspects, and 4 dimensions that are framing the action roadmap that I mentioned earlier. In the meantime, through the analysis of all the objectives of the innovators, we also generated different type of sustainable innovation priorities by type of innovation, by product, service, social, and so on. And we did meta-analysis of all of these insights to generate 10 research and innovation agendas to support the funding of innovation policy. So you can see how rich a bottom-up approach engaging innovators of different kinds, more than 500, can lead to different type of policy advice for decision makers in public organizations, but also for private. We didn't want to stay there because it was a framework to assess and manage. So in order to manage and to promote the use of managerial type of frameworks and approaches, we identified from those 200 plus cases, 43 pilots, companies, organizations, also municipalities, because there were also governance innovations. And we generated multi-level advice for them. Multi-level means strategic level for top level, for C-level managers, tactical level for mid-level managers, and operational type. And for a selection of these, we identify action roadmaps. We did also a meta-analysis of all this to generate lessons for researchers and for academics to understand what are the meta actions from this. But most importantly, together with the innovators, we selected 46 of these actions that we fully developed into action roadmaps using that framework. Each of these action roadmaps consisted of these 10 key aspects. So there are more than 400 recommendations in them. So we did meta-analysis again for each of these. It was a very rich project, as you can see from each of these aspects and the 3 steps of assessment and management, the 2 for management. So we had enough material to produce a Springer book, which you can see where we have multiple chapters, sharing also the framework, how to do it, the principles and methodology, but also highlighting special cases and application on social innovations, on stakeholder engagement, and asking as well ourselves, what could be the future for this framework? This framework we have applied now in Milano region. It consists of 4 dimensions: context, people, process, and impact, and 10 key aspects. Because of time, I'll just make a comment for each of these boxes, for each of these 10 key aspects. There is material to share. But the most interesting finding from the analysis of this project was the importance of the people dimension, because often people forget about people. And there are key aspects about managing people. One is to nurture their capacities, their skills, their competences by building the right aptitude. But most importantly, what we found in those roadmaps is that organizations were failing because people had the wrong attitude. They had the right competences and skill sets, but they didn't have the attitude to change and the attitude to advance, to innovate. So that was very important. So to conclude, and there are 2 more sections. How can the European Innovation Council and public funding organizations use this? There are 3 main instruments that are being used depending on the technology readiness that we are looking at. Deep tech project looking at TRL from 1 to 4. Breakthroughs in deep tech are using the Pathfinder instrument that the Commission has implemented. And this type of approaches are helping the Commission, can potentially help the Commission to identify wildcards and weak signals, to provide insights, and those who are seeking to get funded through the Pathfinder instrument, to the uncertainty assessment through the issues analysis framework I mentioned, expert consultations and community engagement, different type of approaches that can be bringing, and the relevance to technology prioritization. So when we're looking at supporting research and deep tech projects, so horizon scanning and Foresight can help in this type of low-level TRL. but also when looking at TRLs 3 and 4 through for example, the European Innovation Council Transition Program that supports maturation and validation. Maturation of solution is very important. Delphi surveys are helping to assess the level of maturity and different type of approaches. The business case development in the ENISA project was also important, and how to utilize different ways, data analytics, bibliometrics, and patent analysis that we have used as well for ENISA. Last but not least, there is another case program, the EIC Accelerator, which is supporting startups and small and medium enterprises. And here the advice and the use of Foresight and horizon scanning is closer to the case study that I presented that we did for the CASI project and what we're doing for Milano. So strategic guidance, risk mitigation, and facilitating innovation. The way forward, and these are my conclusions. Well, the 4 cases of best practices that we selected with the Commission, the I know, technology horizon, and the trends for AI, for cybersecurity, and CASI, they show different levels of scope. So some of them, they have national scope or European scope or global scope, most of them, or even regional scope with the Milano case. And the focus has been sometimes on disruptive innovation, sometimes on emerging technologies, sometimes in both, or sustainable innovation. And different type of programs can benefit from tools we have applied in them. So the 4 cases, they were selected because of this. And there are frameworks like the issue analysis framework that can be used, and the action road mapping that can be used in several science, technology, innovation funding instruments, regardless of the focus, and the critical issues analysis as well. What it is important is to make sure that this type of anticipatory thinking is used as well to identify cross-cutting funding opportunities. So if we are looking into the future of energy, this also implies understanding, especially now with energy transition and the Green Deal in Europe and other initiative, environmental policy and sustainability policy and social policy. So it's cross-cutting funding of opportunities, and cross-fertilization is very important within the innovation and the entrepreneurship ecosystems to drive desirable transformation. Developing platforms and tools like the ones that we have developed in the Bolero project and CASI and multiple in the INO, it is important to recognize and to manage different type of critical issues, especially weak signals and wildcards, so through a knowledge base which is customized to the needs of the client. And my last slide to open the debate for discussion is that, and I believe, and this is why we have created together with some colleagues Green Iceberg, that the way forward inevitably involves foresight-driven orchestration of innovation through systematic knowledge valorization. And it's an understanding of the importance of commercialization of IP and spin-off creation. In addition to my academic life and working as well as a public servant and developing different type of projects and leading research activities, I have been an entrepreneur creating spin-off like Futures Time, like Green Iceberg in Poland, supporting technology partners in Poland to create a new center for foresight and internationalization there. TMBK, a spin-off focused on commercialization of IP, and I have been recently invited to other countries in Latin America and Africa to create different types of CFIs. Different centers for foresight and internationalization is one of the main type of activities I am involved now. And I'm happy to support you if you would like to create such center to support the first 2 years or the first 3 years and then remain only as an advisor. But at the beginning, it is important to give a good kickstart. And then knowledge valorization doesn't happen magically. It is important, it is based on knowledge co-creation through collaborative research and contract research, such as the projects that I was asked to focus on in this report for technology foresight, for public funding and innovation. And different type of projects, they can be collaborative funding through the European Commission framework programs like Horizon Europe, or contract research, such as the projects that I have received from ENISA. I also did a contract research project for Dubai, especially and for the government in the Emirates, for the agency, the space agency, on how to help identify opportunity pathways for the Emirates Space Agency to position a large number of humans on Mars. So that was one of the largest time frame. We had over 100 years. And that's a fascinating project that looks into the real far horizon. But this collaborative research and contract research doesn't happen magically. Knowledge co-creation can happen because we have knowledge sharing activities like this type of events at the Global Council for Innovative Organizations and different type of organizations, such as Triple Helix associations. I will be soon with Joseph Piquet and with the organizers of the Triple Helix conference in Brazil and different other organizations like Finland Futures Research Center, the Futures Conference, Manchester University, where I have been developing professional development courses over the years, for over 20 years, specific on foresight, developing different type of groups, creating groups inside universities, like in Poland, we have created in Białystok University, the Foresight and Interdisciplinary Studies team, and recently in Warsaw University of Technology, the Innovation Ecosystem Orchestration team. But it is important to understand that this type of networking, like the one we are having today in professional development, are at the very bottom of this iceberg that you can see there, that can lead to knowledge co-creation and eventually the tip of the iceberg, knowledge valorization. Thank you very much for the invitation once again, and now I'm open to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Rafael. Very insightful. Please, if you can stop sharing, and maybe we'll hear a promo video very shortly. In the meantime, please try to think about any questions that you have for Rafael, and I'll give you the floor. Victor?
Hi, my name is Hitendra Patel. I represent the Global Innovation Management Institute. We are honored to be part of the Global Council for Innovation Organizations because we are very excited about the opportunity of spreading innovation globally through certifications and standards. This council that we have put together will allow us to share best practices, exchange ideas between universities, between governments, between companies, between different geographies. It is the exchange of these ideas and this ecosystem that we are building that will help us close the gap and democratize innovation everywhere and improve the quality of life of every human on this planet.
Okay, great. Thank you. Again, Rafael, great wealth of knowledge, basically. Please help me spotlight Rafael in the meantime. Rafael, I'll start maybe with a question in the meantime that others are thinking. So please raise your hand so we know if you have a question. First of all, since you have such a extensive experience in this, and you have done lots of researches in Europe and other countries, my question is, which are the countries, maybe you can talk only about Europe or worldwide, depending on basically your data, but which are the countries, let's say, that are incorporating more strongly future foresight, in particular in public administration, since that's your specialty? And what are the drivers, right? Might be internal or external drivers that are basically pushing them to do this.
Yes, thank you. There are many countries, and this is very good news. As you can see in the timeline of my professional career, I actually follow more or less a trajectory which is in line with some of these leading countries. So the reason to leave UNIDO, United Nations, that was positioning technology foresight programs in Latin America and the Caribbean and Central and Eastern Europe in the beginning of the 2000s, and to move to the UK is precisely because the PRESS, now Manchester Institute of Innovation Research, but the PRESS team back then, Policy Research, Engineering, Science and Technology, led by Professor Luke Giorgio, was one of the strongest think tank, if not the strongest, in the beginning of the 2000s in the area of foresight. So it was a no-brainer to go to the UK. And UK not only launched the first and the second and the third cycle of foresight, but many other sector-specific and regional foresight initiatives that have inspired many countries in Europe. So apart from the UK, I would say Finland in Europe is very strong, and that's why I have linked myself to Finland Futures Research center in the University of Turku, academically very strong, and there's a conference coming in soon where I would like to invite you as well to take part. There are also virtual elements. So Finland has been very strong in introducing foresight also in the parliament. There is a committee for the future and in many other areas. In Europe, there are many countries. In Latin America too, Brazil has been a strong player. Chile is very strong as well, and Argentina, there are events in Argentina and Uruguay. I'm working hard to create a center for foresight and internationalization in one of those countries. I will not disclose, but in one of those, soon we might be having an institution like that. So Latin America has been very strong, Mexico too. Of course, the US, I mentioned DARPA here. The US has been leading in emerging technologies and disruptive innovations. Now, I am trying to strengthen Africa and working as well with Asia and the Middle East. So Middle East has been a very strong player, emerging, I would say, but very powerful, very well positioned now. In Dubai, there are different organizations, and Abu Dhabi too, doing foresight. So I would say now it's a global phenomenon, but there's still different type of, like 50 shades of gray. So there are 50 shades of foresight. And the purpose of different of the initiatives that I am doing is to level up, so to working with emerging economies. Thank you.
A quick,
Rafael, go ahead, Erla.
maybe a quick follow-up on that. Do you see any change in the demand, after COVID? You mentioned a little bit, but I guess that's one trigger, right? Usually governments or these public institutions, when they basically face this sort of natural disaster or this type of events, then they basically are reminded that's why it's important, to foresee this event. So do you see any change in this?
Definitely. I think that COVID was a wake-up call for everyone. There were still many policymakers, in many countries, including developed countries, and leading organizations that have been for many years skeptical about the importance of foresight. And there's no way that anyone will, with a rational attitude, exclude foresight from their strategic planning. So, and another element is that it's not only in public funding organizations, but they have been a surge in multinational companies, in large oil companies and oil and gas now, especially because of energy transition. Actually, traditionally, foresight has been in the industry sector with shale scenarios, and many other cases have been there, but only for big multinational enterprises. But now even middle-sized companies and some startups are using foresight, which is amazing. So I definitely agree that the COVID crisis has dramatically transformed the landscape for the better, I would say.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yes.
Rafael, I used to work with Peter Schwartz at GBN, Global Business Network, and this was a monitor group where we built a full practice on basically futures and forecasting and all that. And then that technology came out of Shell. Now, one of the conversations that I had with Peter Schwartz and the team at GBN was they had been invited to predict what were the terrorist attacks that could happen to the United States. And number 11 on that list of things was planes flying into the towers of 9/11. Mm-hmm. And it was unfortunately number 11. There was another top 10 list of other things they could do. The question I have is, that conversation stayed with me for a long time, that we could forecast using multiple scenarios of uncertain, certain trends and everything else to make a list of things and be Nostradamus. And to a large extent, Peter felt like he was a Nostradamus of the 20th century. He was forecasting things everywhere, right? But guess what? He missed. And as proudly as he said, I predicted it happening, it was number 11 on the list for the CIA and the FBI. And planes flew in and the towers came down. So my question to you is just as we become more and more able to predict, or not predict, forecast potential scenarios, how do we also hold ourselves accountable for actually mitigating and executing those things and prioritizing, and then saying, look, I predicted COVID, but I didn't help actually make it happen. How do we bring accountability on the foresight?
Yeah, This is a very good question, and if you allow me, let me answer with one of your. I like your keynote here in this forum, and I invite others to visit it. I think one of the maybe generic answers would be through the power of and. The power of and is sometimes we decide to have single affiliation. Right. So I have been a researcher in the University of Manchester for many years, and then I realized I was frustrated that many projects were not delivering as I wanted them to deliver. And when the Department of Health asked me, we want to do something similar to what you did in this project now for the developing the Horizon scanning system on healthcare. And then I said, well, I can do it, but I can only do it with my own company. And then they said, do it. So in 2011, I decided to use the power of and to become an entrepreneur, to do the first startup or spin-off, remaining as a researcher, doing a lot of research and innovation projects for Europe, but launch Futures Diamond to answer this question and this demand. And then through my career, you can see also in my multiple affiliations, the power of and. I'm still an academic, I'm still a researcher, an entrepreneur. And when we develop the frameworks in the INO project, I was actually interviewed by Financial Times Deutschland. I think it doesn't exist anymore. And a cover page and full page, also the man with the crystal ball. And I was pretty annoyed about that because foresight is not about predicting the future and we don't have crystal balls. And then later on when COVID happened, I was also interviewed by Technica Italaus, which is a major newspaper here in Finland. Precisely because a whole article because of the COVID report that we wrote in 2011. And then it becomes, yes, a frustration when you anticipate futures and there is no action. I did try the power of and to join some public organizations in government, but then I decided to focus on private organizations, private foundations and research organizations. I have not rejected that in the future I might switch to work for a government or for an international organization again to have the capacity. But we need to understand that researchers and people working in foresight, even if we have the power of and you can mobilize and influence decision making, we are not decision makers. Okay, so what we can do is to disseminate and share the knowledge and to try to be persuasive and to convince others. But you shouldn't be frustrated because recommendations that you gave were not implemented. It is the duty and responsibility to push for action. I can give you a last example, which is beautiful, and this is why one of the reasons I was asked to give a keynote in the forthcoming conference, the Futures Conference in Turku, on the future of forest-based bioeconomy. And there we did a project for the Uruguayan government on forest-based bioeconomy. And as we all know, governments change and priorities change. And we developed 15 action roadmaps that were there left in limbo for a while. But together with local stakeholders, we managed to take them out of the grave. And we are activating, and for some of these action roadmaps in new governments and new governmental agencies, there is plenty of work that is ongoing. But because we have this duty of care and responsibility to try to make change happen. When it happens to issues related to security and defense, it's more difficult, Hitendra, because the decision makers are in high-level security units that are not often listening to foresight researchers. And this information is classified, and it's difficult to enter these circles, even though I did a couple of gigs for DSTL in the UK, only to share knowledge on how to better understand and analyze weak signals and wildcards. But later on, I was not involved again in the Defense Science and Technology Laboratory.
No, perfect. I like the answer. And again, for those who are using foresight, there's a lesson here. You know, we can create the futures, you can imagine them, but you have to take them seriously and you got to execute on them. And unfortunately, we've separated the role of imagination and prediction, not prediction, but scenario forecasting to execution. And maybe we should bring it a little closer, and that might make a little bit of a difference. We have our expert from the GIMI network, Antonio Alvarenga. He has been driving Future Foresight also and a certification program. And he's the one who's been actually really powerful in implementing this in the Dubai region in the UAE. So Antonio, you have the floor. You ask the questions. Like-minded heroes on this topic.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. You know, it's a very special event to have Rafael here. Actually, I met Rafael. I'm a little bit ashamed of saying it, but Rafael, it was in 2006 in Manchester, and but you look great. You know, we are both older, I guess, with Michael Keenan and Luke Giorgio and other people that were there at the time. It was an incredible group, also working. You know, I remember regional foresight, territorial foresight, and methodologies. I remember the diamond that you were developing at that period. So it's very happy to have you here in our community. I had many more technical questions. So I'm fighting that fight also since 1999, 2000. I did the College of Europe in Belgium, and I had an elective called scenario planning. Very much with someone from PwC that had this elective. Glenn Peters actually had a book on scenario planning. And that was my first. So then I did many things, government, consultancy, and this kind of work. Also a lot of work with the European Commission. So really happy to have you here. And I was, it's an holiday today here in Portugal. I'm based in Portugal, but of course, I needed to come. So I wanted just to share, I have two questions for my long list. Maybe one day we can get together again. I don't know when, but maybe in Finland. But I have two questions.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. Or if you come to Lisbon, but I have two. So, I remember in terms of, one about technological road mapping, and the link with AI. I'm interested because it was a very important methodology. It used to be, and I got the impression that maybe it's not that important anymore when you try to explore the future of technology. I wanted to have your impression about the evolution of technological road mapping. It's a methodology that I think it was like an interesting way of thinking about the future of technology, but maybe I don't know, you talked about action roadmaps. So technology road mapping link with action roadmaps, and maybe with AI, what's AI changing in that anticipation of technology? And the other one is weak signals. So I also did a work commissioned by the European Commission. They've called it signals and trends, also like last year. And I always had this idea, this struggling with weak signals, because, everything is all the scanning parts, even our brains are addicted to find the strong signals. So I would like to hear you about this almost paradox of focusing on the weak, on the signals that will not develop, that most likely will not develop. So if you could address a little bit the technological roadmap, how you see it and its future and present, and this paradox that I would call it about weak signals, I'll be very happy.
Yes, thank you. Basically, I do recognize the importance of technology roadmaps, and they will remain important in many sectors, absolutely. What I would like to clarify is that most of my projects, I have really found a growing interest in developing action roadmaps rather than technology ones, because some of the actions are inevitably about technology development and investment and technology upgrade. Okay, so the action roadmaps are kind of hybrid. They combine both technology roadmap and action roadmaps, but the layers are different. The layers of the action roadmap force you to think about the context, which you also have some kind of environmental factors in technology roadmap. But then the next is thinking about the people and the type of competencies and skills that you need to develop the technologies that you are aiming at, and the type of attitude, the risk-taking attitude to pilot those technologies, etc. Like in DARPA and many other organizations, they have to experiment, right? And then the process dimension is consisting on two. I have a whole lecture on this, a whole talk on this. The process dimension consists of two key aspects, which are quite generic, and they do apply, and technology road mapping classic approaches embed in each of those. One of the key aspects is catalytic actions, things which are new, that you need to do that you haven't done. And it forces you to create and to innovate because you need to do things which are catalytic. And the second key aspect is fostering. So there are actions that you're doing, but you're not doing well enough, or you are not doing enough of them. You should be doing more of that. And the same happens with technologies, right? So the action roadmap is a hybrid. I would say it's a wider network. And then the impact dimension forces you to think about the transformations that you aim, which you also have with the technology roadmap, but also brings the sustainability dimension, because nowadays, especially in Europe and developed countries, with the Paris agreements and with the climate action type of agenda, sustainability is becoming stronger. Regarding your second question, yes, we met in 2006, some years ago, yeah, and time flies. But a couple of years after that, I was very happy when the I-know project got funded. So this I-know project was running for 3 years, and in that project, we developed the very first global database of wildcards and weak signals that you can still visit. And many of these wildcards and weak signals are valid, the analysis. The next wildcard that I think is going to hit us very soon is society's mental breakdown. Not only because of the mobile phones, our kids, teenagers are constantly there, and it's difficult to get people out of IT devices and to disconnect. Our brain is constantly bombarded with information and disinformation and a lot. So it's difficult to rest at night, to dream like we used to think creatively, because you are bombarded with fake news, with a lot of, and this will eventually hit us. It was analyzed there. So many of these are still valid, and I have been invited to discuss them. We develop a very nice definition of weak signals there, which consists of 3 types of uncertainties. And we push and encourage many organizations to map weak signals and to analyze them in surveys according to this. Because anything, a driver, a technology that has uncertainty over its interpretation is a weak signal, right? So if for you, a technology is an opportunity like AI, but for others it's a threat because we might be losing jobs because of etc., okay? Then we are in front of a weak signal. But if on top of that, we have the uncertainty of the importance, because for some this is important, and for others it's totally not important and irrelevant, we shouldn't do this. Like touchscreen technology. For Apple, it was very important. For Nokia, even though they developed the first touchscreen device prototype, they didn't invest on it. It was not important. Bang. So weak signals can lead to wildcards, high impact events. And the third uncertainty is the uncertainty over its impact. You might think that particular signal or technology, AI, will have an impact on technology, will have an impact on transport, will have an impact, but it might have multiple impacts in different sectors. And then when you are confronted with any critical issue, technology or an event, or a politician as well, or an institution that has all 3 types of uncertainties, you have a very important weak signal to work on, to analyze, and to brainstorm about possible disruptions, black swans or wildcards, you name it. But what are the transformational issues that will change the landscape and lead to these transformations in technology and economy that we need to focus on for socio-technical transformation, systems transformation, assessment, and sustainable innovation. So there is plenty of work that is still needed there. And I agree with you. Many organizations are developing databases, and they are developing private or public, but they are not systematically assessing those issues against those 3 types of uncertainties of interpretation, importance, and impact. And if we do so, then we can prioritize the weak signals and act upon them before the wildcards emerge.
Rafa, Antonio, first of all, I want to thank you for the question, Antonio. Rafa, for the great answer on weak signals. Just for the audience, we are at the end of the 1 hour allocated for this webinar. So I do understand if you have to drop off, you have to leave. We do appreciate you participating. This event happens every week, every month for the GCIO, and you're invited back every month with another great speaker like Rafael Popper, who will be talking about something that will provoke you into an insight, and that insight should drive an action from you. The objective of everything we do in the GCIO is to share knowledge, connect people, and do more. Dr. Popper is available to talk. Reach out to him. He speaks, he does research, he does consulting. He can help your government, he can help your organizations do amazing things. So with that, those are the drop off. Thank you very much. We're going to continue talking for a few more minutes if you're okay, Rafael, because this is a very engaging conversation. And please stick around if you need to. Thank you very much.